Welcome, everybody. My name is Katie Neff. I am a program manager at the Tamer Center for Social Enterprise. Thank you all for joining us today. If you're in New York or on the East Coast, it's a little bit of a rainy day, but we're lucky to have a wonderful group join us from Beirut and to discuss the process of reviving Beirut from such a challenging time for many reasons. And we have a wonderful group of speakers here. I'm going to introduce Tony Tamer, the Tamer Center's very own Tony Tamer, founder and CEO of H.I.G Capital. And I'll introduce you in a second, Tony, to say a few words. But we also have a nice list here of Kim Issa, who's a 2014 grad of the business school, director of advancement at International College. Zeina Mhanna, director at LIFE, the Lebanese International Finance Executives. Michelle Mouracade, country director at Alfanar, the Arab Venture Philanthropy Organization. Mona Shantouf, general manager at Colgate-Palmolive, and also a board member, and she at Nusaned. So that's a typo, sorry about that, Mona. And Johnny Yaacoub, 2016 grad, an engagement manager at Strategy N, part of the PwC network, who also spent his free time, most recently, working to do an impact assessment on the Beirut explosion. Zahi Ghorayeb, the MENA co-president, soon to be class of 2021, and Lara Najjar, also soon to be class of 2021, a MENA club member, and also someone who worked very hard in bringing together some classmates to raise nearly $30,000 to support the disaster relief effort. So a packed house here. Thank you all for joining. And with that, I'm gonna turn it over to Tony to say a few words on why this is such a near and dear issue to him.
Thank you so much, Katie. Thank you for having me here. I want to thank the Tamer Center for Social Enterprise, the faculty, the staff, everybody who was involved in putting this together. It saddens me to say, when I think about Lebanon, that if you had to come up with a script for a scary horror movie, you literally could not have come up with a more tragic story than what Lebanon has lived through during the past 12 months and continues to live through today. It's hard to believe that if you go back to the 1960s, Lebanon used to be ranked as one of the top 10 highest GDP per capita countries in the world, exceeding Sweden, Norway, and many others. It was and is still today a beautiful country. Often we all know is referred to as the Paris of the Middle East. It used to be the center of culture, of arts, of fashion, of finance in the entire region. And a population that is well known for its advanced level of education. Fast forward today, and in a matter of just a couple of years, the country has very sadly become in literally a state of ruin and on course to becoming a failed state. About a year ago, even before the August 4 Beirut explosion, the Lebanese economy started collapsing as a result of a massive banking and debt crisis and a currency that has devalued by almost 5 times, with depositors practically losing all of their life savings. I mean, imagine, you wake up one day, you go to the bank, and your banker tells you you no longer have any money that you have in the bank. And then if you're lucky enough to still have a job or to have any access to any of the local currency, your buying power has gone down by 5 times. The currency is worth 20 cents what it used to be. So that has pushed the middle class into utter poverty and pushed the poor into literally total despair. If that wasn't enough, tragedy hit again twice. First with COVID, and then even more devastatingly, as we all know, the biggest non-nuclear explosion ever recorded in history hit the capital Beirut a couple of months ago, causing unimaginable damage to people, homes, and property. With the level of poverty now exceeding about 60% of the population, Beirut and the people of Lebanon are, until this day, suffering from the repercussions of all of these events. But despite all of this and the lack of any form of government help or intervention, the Lebanese have remained resilient. Today, we're here to acknowledge and support the impressive NGOs, the social entrepreneurs working in Beirut, and hear about the heroic work, frankly, that they're doing as they pick up the pieces in the aftermath of the explosion that devastated the capital. I want to say it's great to see the Colombia community coming together in a positive way on this and on so many challenges going on in the world. And that's very much in line with the mission of the Tamer Center for Social Enterprise at Columbia, which is to promote, to encourage, to educate leaders in using business management, entrepreneurial skills to address the social challenges of our times and support a better future. As some of you know, I myself was born and raised in Beirut. I emigrated to the United States when I was a teenager. So this particular crisis we're discussing today is not only a part of the many global challenges we focus on in the Center for Social Enterprise, but it's also one that is very deeply personal one to me. Before we move on to the next speaker, I would like to thank Johnny Yaacoub, 2016 Business School graduate, for reaching back to the CBS community, specifically to Bruce Usher, Sandra Navali, and the Tamer Center in this time of need. MENA co-president, Zahi Ghorayeb, and MENA member Lara Najjar for your gracious fundraising efforts. And of course, to welcome and thank our NGO guest speakers for taking the time to be with us and share their good work. Issa, Mona Shantouf, Michelle Mouracade, and Zeina Mhanna. With that, I'm going to turn it back over to Katie Neff.
Tony, thank you so much. Of course, this is something near and dear to you. We really appreciate your time, and it's a great start to this event.
Thank you, Katie. Thank you so much.
And we know you have to run, but we hope you enjoy while you have the time to be with us. So folks, we've got a great event today. I'm just going to let you know how this is going to work, and then I'm going to turn it over to you, Johnny. So we are organized into 3 parts here. Johnny is going to take us through the impact assessment work he did to tell us a little bit more about the true impact of this disaster and what that means. And then we're going to hear from our NGO representatives and our 2 MENA Club representatives to discuss the role and impact of the Lebanese community at Columbia, and then also beyond in the NGO world. Right after that, we will have a Q&A. So if you have any questions throughout this entire time, feel free to put those into the Q&A chat box at the bottom of your screen. And Lara is going to help us answer all of the questions that come up as you think of them. Our third and final part is going to be thinking about the transition from direct relief to long-term sustainability. And we have great guests to discuss what they're doing on the ground now and what they envision doing in the future. After that, we'll have a final round of Q&A. So feel free to fill in those questions as we go along, and we'll try to answer as many as we possibly can. Lastly, if you cannot stay with us, please check out in the chat box. We have a link for each of the organizations speaking today. If you feel moved to donate to the efforts that they are currently working on, we really appreciate that support. And you can just click on those links. You can learn more about their organizations, and you can also donate financially, if, as I said, if you feel moved. And with that, Johnny, I'm turning it over to you.
Thank you, Katie, for the intro. Thank you very much, Tony, for the kind words, and actually the wider Tamer Center leadership and team for hosting this webinar and keeping the conversation going about reviving Beirut. When I first reached out actually to Professor Bruce Usher, co-director of the center, to think of ways in which the school and the center could, help after the Beirut blast, he and the Tamer Center team at large really did not hesitate to extend their full support. And I mean, the Lebanese Columbia community is grateful, very grateful for that. You all know about the August 4th Beirut explosion and its tragic death toll and destruction. More than 200 innocent people dead, thousands injured, hundreds of thousands displaced, and a severe blow to the infrastructure and economic sectors of the country. What you may not know, and Tony actually couldn't have said it better, is that this has happened during one of the most trying periods in Lebanon's history. The country has been overburdened by a refugee inflow crisis since 2011, bankrupted from decades of mismanagement by an incompetent ruling class, thrown into severe financial and economic crises. I'm talking 50% unemployment, 5 times currency devaluation, 500% inflation, really total loss in the country's leadership and in the midst of a COVID-19 outbreak. And then this massive explosion happens, wiping out a huge part of Beirut, decimating its busiest streets, liveliest culture hubs, and the country's main seaport. It really was like a final nail in Lebanon's coffin, unfortunately. It feels like yesterday, and mind you, I mean, while I certainly, and like many others, felt the full force of the blast, it pales in comparison to the thousands who lost, family and homes and livelihoods. And as the sadness and shock subside, and once you realize that those are supposed to manage such crises, not really entrusted by their own people, you're hit with this panic. How can we get out of this mess? How can I help? Is it really my role? Naturally, in this chaos, a massive third sector relief effort was launched by people young and old, organizations, NGOs, local and international. So you look around for a platform to contribute through actually. And I personally found that in my consulting firm Strategy and, which gave me and the full team the chance to work on a pro bono rapid impact assessment to help direct incoming funding to the most critically impacted and underfunded sectors and districts in Beirut. I'll walk you through that very shortly. What was very heartwarming actually was realizing how fellow Colombia went through the same journey, and they were trying to make an impact within their own surroundings as well, as we will see in this webinar. I'm gonna pull up a few slides from the study we did at Strategy and just to give you a sense of the scale of the destruction that the explosion left behind. So Strategy and conducted this pro bono assessment in response to donors' requests to direct the funding that has been raised into the sectors that were most needed. So the objectives behind this study were to quantify the size of the damage on infrastructure, social and economic fronts, identify the funding requirements versus the pledges coming in to figure out what the gap is to fund these and rebuild Beirut, and raise awareness on the sources of the donations pledged per sectors actually, so that we minimize duplication of efforts. The scope covered 6 sectors: housing, food security, healthcare, education, businesses, and culture. And we looked at the impact on the infrastructure, social impact, and economic impact. So our methodology relied on geospatial data analysis, comparing the blast radii, looking at on-the-ground data points from a multitude of survey responses, Google Maps data, expert interviews, and other data sources to help us in the end come up with a mapping of the different types of damages per district within Beirut, as you can see here on the right. And this, in turn, to help funnel specifically where the funding should go to, so that donors who are raising these funds know where they should support NGOs that are working in these areas and in these regions. And I invite you all to check out the Strategy and Middle East website to see the detailed interactive tool on this and the detailed impact assessment study. Now, in terms of findings, infrastructure impact was estimated at around $3.1 billion US, and the absolute majority of this came from the damages to residences and businesses. Actually, housing was huge. Actually, $1.8 billion on housing, more than 200,000 households damaged, from minimal damage to total destruction of the buildings. And the second biggest damaged sector was businesses, destroyed businesses. And here we looked at the capital requirements per type of business and per size of business, etc. Culture actually took a big hit. Unfortunately, the area that was damaged from the blast is actually a cultural hub with a lot of heritage buildings that were unfortunately severely damaged, along with damages to healthcare infrastructure, damaged hospitals and clinics, schools, universities, etc. On social impact, the damage was estimated at around $555 million within a radius of 4.1 kilometers of the explosion. The biggest part of that came from loss of jobs, either temporary or permanent loss of jobs from the destroyed businesses, as well as food assistance for more than 300,000 people in need of urgent or moderate food assistance. In addition to that, temporary housing required another $30 million, and treatment of patients from both physical injuries and mental health issues required another $80 million in funding. In terms of economic impact, and this here we're talking about direct foregone output from the businesses that were destroyed within this radius of the explosion. We're talking about more than $920 million split per sector, majority from shopping and education, food and drink, services, etc. So this is the direct impact on, let's say, GDP from the lost businesses in the blast in the radius of the blast. So in total, the direct damages were at around $3.7 billion when you talk about infrastructure and social impact. And only 645 million was raised. So it pays in comparison to the overall requirement, less than 18%. There's still a massive $3 billion gap to close and technically rebuild the damaged area. And if we look at it per sector, only healthcare has a relatively sizable portion of the funding requirements actually pledged and delivered. Food security comes next, but then you can clearly see how businesses, culture, education, and housing are still lacking in terms of funding to these sectors, unfortunately. So what next? Really, funding gap is still big, and we need to relaunch fundraising efforts to close this unmet emergency relief and to achieve longer-term recovery, particularly on the smaller businesses, because they have the multiplier effects. Secondly, third and private sectors should maintain their efforts, form coalitions, and keep doubling down on their efforts to tackle the issues of scale and collaborate and avoid duplication of their efforts. And lastly, and quite relevant to our webinar here, is that donors should support social enterprises and fund quite smart initiatives that achieve sustainability and direct impact on the local community. I invite you to check our website for the detailed impact assessment. But for now, I'm going to be handing over to other members of the Lebanese Columbia community. Actually, as I was mentioning, many of them, took their own initiative as well and worked on delivering impact within their surroundings, as you will see from them now. And it's based on their own experiences with the explosion. It moved them to immediate relief action. Some worked on building awareness, others did fundraising. If you are actually leading NGOs or supporting organizations in running these relief efforts on the ground. With that, I would like to hand over to Zahi and Lara from the CBS MENA Club to tell us how they reacted to the explosion. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Johnny, for the impact assessment. Now we're going to talk more about the role and impact of the Lebanese Columbia community, starting at the school and then beyond. So I'm going to share my screen. Okay. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Zahi Ghorayeb, and I am one of the co-presidents of the MENA Club at Columbia Business School. I'm going to talk about the MENA Club's key goals for the year, and then we'll pass it over to Lara to discuss more about the Beirut Emergency Relief Fund that we launched with the club. As MENA Club this year, we initially had a lot of plans and ideas in mind, so we were interested in having a strong presence in the Columbia community early on to maximize our impact at the school. To do that, we doubled down on our marketing efforts and encouraged a lot of CBS students to join the club. A total of 200 members joined the club, which is a record. Having this strong presence at Columbia, we have set 4 goals for the year, which are to first, raise awareness about the MENA business ecosystem. So we started a LinkedIn group, which we're using to keep our members engaged about the latest events happening in the region. And we're also planning to organize a conference next semester to host prominent leaders that will discuss business dynamics across multiple industries and functions. Our second goal is to facilitate career opportunities and provide ongoing support for students interested in recruiting in the region, especially after a tough recruiting cycle impacted by COVID. Third, we're strengthening the MENA Columbia community by organizing social and joint events with other clubs at Columbia, such as the Latin, African, and Spanish club. And finally, we're planning to promote the MENA Club, the MENA culture, by organizing cultural deep dives and planning international dinners. With these goals in mind, and with having established a wide footprint at Columbia, we decided to leverage our presence to further raise awareness about the Beirut blast in the Columbia community. So the Lebanese members of the MENA Club gathered and decided to launch the Beirut Emergency Relief Fund, which Lara will talk more about.
Thanks, Zahi. So at the onset of the blast, most of us were very devastated, but we quickly got organized, and 11 of us MENA Club members from the class of 2021 started Beirut Emergency Relief Fund organized by CBS. And the donors of that fund were mainly MENA Club members. They were the wider Columbia student body, faculty, alumni, and school affiliates. So thank you very much for everyone who has donated to this fund. We raised approximately an amount of $30,000 in 4 weeks. And the fund was entirely transferred to Nusaned to support the shelter and the reconstruction efforts in the exposed areas. With that in mind, it's my pleasure to introduce Mona Shantouf, who's a board member and the secretary at Nusaned. Mona is in parallel the GM of the Mashriq region at Colgate-Palmolive. Before joining Colgate in March 2017, Mona held different leadership positions at Reckitt Benckiser and at Nokia. She was actually one of the 3 GM women leaders globally at Nokia. Mona earned an MBA from the American University of Beirut and a bachelor degree in business administration from the same university. Mona, thank you so much for joining us today. I'll hand it off to you to present Nusaned and the efforts there.
Thank you, Lara, for the introduction. Hello, everyone. It's great to be here on behalf of Nusaned. And thank you, CBS, for trusting Nusaned to be your local partner for your relief efforts in Lebanon. Quickly on Nusaned, We are actually a group of professionals who decided to get together to try and make a difference given the drastic economic crisis we have seen in Lebanon. We have set ourselves the mission to support the underserved Lebanese communities become self-sustainable. How? By developing 3 core programs. Our Crops That Yield program, which aims at developing productive economies. Our Roofs That Shield and Goods and Needs program, which actually aim at providing shelter and food security, which we believe are a prerequisite to any decent living. In the aftermath of the Beirut explosion, which happened on the 4th of August, we had to redivert our efforts in 2 of our programs to come to the rescue of those impacted in Beirut. Our emergency response was actually divided in 2 phases. Our phase 1 started the 2nd day after the explosion. We distributed more than 10,000 hot meals. We distributed water, food parcels, as well as clothing vouchers under our Goods and Need program. And in parallel, under Roofs That Shield, our volunteers were deployed to do the cleaning up efforts, removing the rubbles of the streets, the houses. And in parallel, we set up our shelter hotline, which till date has received already 2,000 calls for help. We have tried as well to do some quick fixes where possible for people to stay in their homes. Our phase 2, which is ongoing, is aiming actually at supporting 10,000 Lebanese families with food parcels for 3 months, a parcel costing around $43 a month. We are supporting them with personal hygiene and cleaning kits as well. And under our Roofs That Shield, our team leaders and volunteers are running value-based needs assessment using Nusaned's own application, inputting details on the damages on the units they visit, as well as different criteria that could be relevant to the donors. We have also identified 3 levels of intervention for the houses and SMEs, ranging from minimal to severe, costing around 1,000 for the minimal and an estimated 10,000 for the severe units. On the furniture front, we collaborated with other NGOs that are more specialized in that area. What we believe is actually key to our success, given that we are less than a 1-year-old NGO, is our strong belief in the power of collaboration. We are here and we keep our focus on the end result, which is supporting the communities in need. It's not about Nusaned getting the glory. It's about collaborating with any local partner on the ground that can help us reach that goal. And as such, you see us partnering with so many great international NGOs. Life is sitting with us here on the panel. Local NGOs such as H.I.G, also here on the panel. We have partnered with global multinationals, the likes of Pfizer, PepsiCo, General Mills, among others, and educational institutions like AUB and of course, Columbia. Our second key success factor, we believe, is transparency. Especially in a country where corruption is as high as Lebanon, donors need to see every dollar they donate is well spent. For that purpose, our application, which I'm going to show you here, actually gives its users visibility, live updates on our programs. You can scroll through the program you're interested in, area you want to see, and then the donors also have special access to scroll down to the units they sponsored and see what has been done on those units. We have also an interactive map that gives you a general overview on how we are tracking in terms of number of units assessed in the zones that were allocated to us by RE, the ones that were rehabilitated and those that are under rehabilitation. For the same purpose of transparency, and for those who don't have the app, we issue our monthly pager, which gives its readers an update on our programs again, how we're tracking, and then updates on key initiatives during the month. You can see here our collaboration with IWC highlighted. They gave Nusaned the proceeds from 30 watches, special edition done for Lebanon. We also highlight any updates on our teams and partnerships. And finally, we get to the amazing Colombia contribution and impact. Thank you to the business school. And I would like to thank especially Lara Najjar, because she trusted and recommended Nusaned to the CBS community. Your generous donation of around $30,000 have impacted the lives of around 40 Lebanese citizens and allowed Nusaned to rehabilitate 7 units. Take a look at what your kind donations have allowed us to do. So our interventions range from plasterworks to tileworks, painting, sanitation, depending on the levels of intervention we saw needed. And Colombia will, of course, receive a detailed report by the end of the month or next week, exactly on the works that were done on those units. Thank you, really. And I would like to leave you with this quote that is dear to my heart from Pope Francis. Life is good when you are happy, but much better when others are happy because of you. Thank you again, Colombia. Keep thinking about Lebanon and keep talking about it. We highly need you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Mona. We are very happy to see that the relief efforts have smoothly progressed, and we are looking forward to the next update on the deployment of this fund.
Sure.
The role of the Columbia University extends beyond the current students. Our dear alumni have always and continue to extensively support the efforts on the ground and so to support the country. With that in mind, it is my pleasure to introduce Kim Issa. Kim is actually a CBS alum from the class of 2014. She is the Director of Advancement at the International College in Beirut and a board member of the NGO Arc-en-Ciel. Arc-en-Ciel is Lebanon's largest independent social enterprise and was awarded Social Enterprise by the Year by the Schwab Foundation, who are the organizers of the World Economic Forum in Davos in 2015, among others. Prior to CBS, Kim also worked in consumer goods. She worked at Procter & Gamble in Geneva, in Switzerland. Kim, it's a pleasure to see you here with us. I'm looking forward to hearing more about Arc-en-Ciel. I will hand it off to you and let you share your screen.
Hi, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. So I'm Kim. I'm a CBS 2014 alum. When I graduated from Columbia, I came back and started working with Arc-en-Ciel, the local NGO. I worked with them for 5 years on the ground, and I'm now sitting on the board. Arc-en-Ciel is a 36 years old NGO, so it's older than Nusaned. And it's been around for a while. It operates as a social enterprise. It has audited financial statements, 600 employees, serves more than 70,000 people a year. That's 300 a day, more or less. And because it's been around for so long, Arc-en-Ciel has many programs in many fields. The Beirut blast happened, and it allowed Arc-en-Ciel to actually use the different fields it usually focuses on and focus the efforts on Beirut, reduce the efforts elsewhere, and then focus everything on Beirut. So I'm going to take this opportunity to use myself and my family as an example of a story of what people actually went through during the Beirut blast. Sorry, can you see my screen? Yes. Okay. All right. This is my sister Miguel. This is August 4, 6 p.m. On the bottom, you can see my sister. My sister Miguel is having a Zoom call with her boss in New York City. She works in consulting, and the Zoom call froze, and then her boss took this screenshot. I'm using this to show you what happened in one room of one apartment of one building in the city of Beirut. So many people have similar stories. So many people have had a shock, and probably everyone that is Lebanese, because the country is so small, have actually lived something, or someone in their family has lived something similar. So I'm using my family as an example to show you what people went through. My sister Miguel on August 4. This is the room she was sitting in. And you can see the desk this is the door of the closet falling on it. So just to show you the immensity of this blast, and we're not even living next to the port. Just look around you. Imagine the glass breaks and falls inside. The closet doors are falling as well, and your room doors explode and fly everywhere. So that's what people felt in every apartment of the city, at least around the Beirut port. The next day, what happened the next day? My husband took a broom and went to clean up our apartment, my parents' apartment. And when he finished, he went to Arc-en-Ciel, the NGO I worked with. And him, along with 1,500 other people, started cleaning people's apartments, people they didn't know. Here are examples of people, the Lebanese citizens took over the streets the next day after the third biggest explosion, after the 2 nuclear explosions. And people took over the streets and started cleaning, COVID permitting. It's important to note, and I saw this question on the chat, that the government has been completely absent from any efforts. There hasn't been even a minute of silence to commemorate the victims of this explosion. It's the people who are holding it. Glass recycling. I want to tell you the story now of my ex-colleague who's a big fan of recycling. She saw all the glass shattered everywhere and realized that it was going to go to waste. She then started an initiative with Arc-en-Ciel, because we do recycling, to recycle all the glass that was fallen from all the different houses. And here you can see they actually recycled 10,000 tons of glass through an Arc-en-Ciel initiative. I want to tell you the story of my cousin, who every day, 2 months after the blast, went down and started conducting needs assessments in houses. Arc-en-Ciel took over the periphery regions, not the center of the explosion, because having been around for years, this is not the first crisis we live. It is the biggest blast, but it's not the first one. And so we are used to the fact that usually regions that are in the periphery are underserved. And so that's where we started. Needs assessment. My cousin also did goods distribution. They started distributing medicine, food, milk for babies, nappies, etc., for people who had lost everything. I would like to tell you about my other sister, Audrey. Here she is. She actually flew from the explosion and fell and broke her pelvis. So for 2 months, she was on complete bed rest. I'm again using the story to tell you that many people had similar stories in Lebanon. As you can see here, she's using a walker. A walker is, it helps her walk. And it's actually a technical aid that is produced in Lebanon by Arc-en-Ciel, by disabled people who produce wheelchairs, crutches, walkers, orthopedic shoes, hospital beds, water mattresses, etc. So all of the technical aid she used actually was provided by Arc-en-Ciel, and they did so for everyone else. Here you can see Arc-en-Ciel is distributing technical aid to people who also need it. I would like to mention also my many friends who donated furniture, they donated clothes, they donated electronics. People just started emptying their homes to give them to those who had lost everything. And Arc-en-Ciel, because we already had an activity that redistributes furniture, an activity that redistributes electronics, and one that redistributes clothes, we were able to cater to all these people who wanted to give but didn't know how to different people. So here you can see furniture distribution, but also furniture refurbishment, because we have workshops where people, and actually usually disabled or underprivileged people, refurbish furniture. And we resend them to the houses they belong to. So here, this gentleman is sitting on a wheelchair and refurbishing furniture. My architect friend, who came from New York City as soon as the blast happened, She works at a big architecture firm in New York City, and she was very involved in cultural preservation of Lebanon. As Johnny mentioned, the blast happened at the Beirut port, and usually cities are built around ports. So the area around the port is one of the oldest of the city. It's very important to not let these buildings fall in ruins and have, tall towers in their place. And so there was a big group of architects, lawyers, etc., who got together in order to preserve this heritage and start working on it. Arc-en-Ciel is part of it through our culture program. We are actually publishing a book on the Beirut cultural heritage, and specifically the houses damaged by the explosion. And finally, my friend from Singapore, who started a fund in order to send children to school. And thanks to their fund, they were able to send 170 children back to school this year. I use this story to show you how only from my very small circle, how much people were involved. Imagine at the level of the whole country. I mentioned this also to show that people used Arc-en-Ciel as a platform so that those who wanted to give could do so easily, and those who needed to benefit could also do so easily. So Arc-en-Ciel was born during the Civil War. The Civil War in Lebanon was from 1975 to 1990. It's a civil war where people were killed on the basis of religion, and Arc-en-Ciel was born to serve everybody, all religions and all sects. And actually, that's why at the beginning it received very little funding because it did not serve a specific party. And that's why, since the beginning, it had to operate as a social enterprise in order to become sustainable. And that was in the 1980s. So that's long before it became cool and long before people like me would study it at Columbia. So I wanted to mention that Arc-en-Ciel started for everybody. It started by Lebanese citizens and for Lebanese citizens. And if there was a prize for good citizen in 2020, I think the Lebanese would have passed it with flying colors. The Lebanese people have not only played the role of citizen, they also played the role of prime minister, minister of interior, of the army, of the banks, of minister of culture, of youth, etc. And while Arc-en-Ciel is doing its best in order to be a platform and to help people link and find each other, to help donors find people who need help, it's very important to say that Arc-en-Ciel is merely a platform, but the real work came from the Lebanese citizen. And when faced with controversy in our darkest hours, it's important to mention that this generation chose to pick up brooms instead of guns. Voilà. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kim, for telling us about Arc-en-Ciel and specifically for sharing your personal experience and your family's experience with the blast. We appreciate that. So there have been some questions in the chat. One of them is about, the areas you think that might need immediate help months after the incident. So how do you allocate resources from Arc-en-Ciel? How do you prioritize them? What are your thoughts, Kim, on that? And then I'll move on to Mona for that question.
So how to prioritize the needs is what you're asking. So NGOs usually, and actually what's interesting here is that Nusaned is a 1-year-old NGO and Arc-en-Ciel is a 36-year-old NGO, and they're both doing work on the ground. And they both probably follow a process that is similar. At least for Arc-en-Ciel, we do a needs assessment. So when I mentioned my cousin I actually met, he went and did needs assessment. So Beirut is a city, but many houses were destroyed. You had houses of people who are financially okay and houses of people who are not. So it's very important to start where the most needs are. And for that, you have social workers whose job is to do needs assessments based on many, many different factors.
Thank you. Mona, your thoughts on that?
Yes, Lara. So like I mentioned in my presentation, our application allows us to input all the details when it comes to the units we are assessing so that the donors can actually filter through any specific requirements they want, whether they want to support women-led, houses, or I don't know, big families with a certain number of children, or families with people that have special needs. So we do that through our value-based needs assessment through our own application, and all the details are there to be filtered for the donors to go through.
Thanks. One question is also from the audience around ensuring that no duplication of efforts is being done. And this is, as we can see, very important because whenever a disaster happens, everyone wants to help, and then ultimately, potentially, we might have some duplication in certain areas. Could you, Kim, talk about how you are coordinating with other players, especially since you've been in the sector for a long time?
Yes, so actually the day after the explosion, we organized ourselves according to the different sectors we're going to work in. So refurbishment is one, glass recycling is another, etc., food distribution. So for each one, there's one person coordinating. And how we do it is that we speak with other NGOs, but we also work with the Lebanese army. The Lebanese army actually took a room in the Beirut municipality. They call it the operation room, where you're supposed to go and say when you're going to refurbish a certain place or a certain building. So you put your stamp on it, which means that no other, in principle, they organize it, so that no other NGO will do the same to make sure there are no duplication of efforts. And when you're done, you also tell them that you're done.
Mona, I let you speak about Nusaned's efforts on that front.
Yes, so actually, like Kim mentioned, the Army had allocated zones to each NGO and the UN as well. So we stick to our zones, and even when we get calls from people impacted from outside the zones allocated, there's a referral system. So we refer to the NGO that is handling that specific zone. And in terms of no duplication between donors, from the other side, for us to make sure the donors can be 100% sure that the units allocated to them are, strictly sponsored on our system. They become linked to the specific donor, so there is no duplication in allocation of units as well.
Great. Mona, just on Nusaned, one question from the audience is on how your organization was impacted by the blast itself. So can you talk about your other programs? Are you intending on?
So we actually haven't stopped, Lara, the other program, which is still ongoing in Akkar. So our Roofs That Shield program had started in Akkar, which we had identified as one of the most underserved communities in Lebanon. So while redirecting the experience we built in Akkar to the Beirut relief efforts, we have kept our teams in Akkar working on the rehabilitation, and we aim at finalizing the target that we had there, 300 houses. They will be hopefully finalized by end of the year.
Great, thank you. And then one question for Nusaned and Arc-en-Ciel. How many people, I think you mentioned this in your presentation previously, but how many people have your organizations served since the explosion? So that seems to be a recurring topic here.
So I'll start with Nusaned. So on the Beirut relief front, we were able to support around 54,000 people between our two programs. In Akkar, we are reaching, or we have reached so far 8,225 people with our Crops That Yield and Roofs That Shield and the Goods in Need. So there we deployed the three programs in Akkar.
Kim, on your end, I think you also mentioned that in the presentation.
We're talking only from the Beirut explosion, right?
Exactly, yes.
Yes, it would be around 20,000 people if we count all the different activities, not only roofs and houses. So distributing food, distributing medicine, etc.
Fantastic, thank you. Kim, I'm just curious, a question maybe from me here. You worked in education in the private sector, you worked in consumer goods in the private sector as well. I'm just curious, like what led you to the social impact sector, and how has your path been so far?
Thanks. I must say that honestly, going to Colombia and learning that social entrepreneurship was, a real thing, and that there's people like Bruce Usher behind it, was an important step for me. It showed that it's not charity, it's actually business, but with a social impact or with an environmental impact or cultural. The way I see society, at least, it's going this way because the consumer is becoming more and more aware of the environment, of the social, and of everything cultural, which means that in order to do good business, you have to become a social business. In order to be profitable, you have to become social business.
Perfect. Thank you so much, both of you, for talking about Nusaned and Arc-en-Ciel. It was a pleasure to hear the overview of the organizations and your personal experiences on that. It's great that we can, rely on direct relief efforts and emergency response on the ground to help mitigate the effect or the impact of the disaster in the short term. But in a country that's constantly rebuilding itself, it's very important to recognize sustainable solutions, which are key in the development of Lebanon. Zahi, I'll hand it off to you to introduce our next section and our next speakers.
Thank you, Lara. So now we're going to talk more about going from direct relief to sustainability. As we briefly mentioned, it's not just about the impact of the explosion. There is a need for a full recovery to get out of the financial and economic crisis in Lebanon, in addition to the explosion. That's why it's important for social enterprises to be involved in sustainable recovery. We're happy to have among us two speakers to discuss that. First, it's my pleasure to introduce Michelle Mouracade from Alfanar. Michelle is Alfanar's country director for Lebanon. She has 23 years of experience in strategy, HR, and organizational consulting across several sectors in the US, Europe, and 7 locations in Asia. Her experience covers a wide range of industries and functional expertise, from banking to internet startups, and from business development to transformation programs. Michelle is also a very passionate executive coach certified by H.I.G in France. In 2016, Michelle joined Alfanar, the first venture philanthropy organization in the Arab world that supports growth stage social enterprises with funding, management support, training, and access to networks. Michelle is also working on launching a regional impact fund to help extend the financial life cycle for successful and promising social enterprises, with up to 80% of the capital allocated in Lebanon, Jordan, and Egypt. Michelle, the floor is all yours.
Thank you, Zahi. Thanks for the introduction. First, I'd like to thank CSB for organizing this and also for the funding that was raised. But I also really appreciate, I've been in touch with the Pangea advisors team of Columbia University that have selected 3 of our social enterprises to provide consulting services to. And this is something we really, really appreciate. Let me just share my screen. I'm not going to go over the context in much detail, first of all, because it's depressing, but also because most of us have already, Tony spoke about it a bit, Johnny, Zahi as well. But I think it's important to note that it's true everyone's talking about the blast that happened in Lebanon, but this is just one of a series of perfect storms that we've had, unfortunately, over the past year. So between the government bankruptcy, the 60% loss of local currency, the capital controls, it's just been nonstop. And today, 50% of the Lebanese population is living below the poverty line. But what is even more worrying is that for the first time in our history, the middle class is really affected. And one of the statistics that demonstrates that is that about 40,000 students have transferred from the private schools to the public school system. Sorry, not 40,000, 400,000. There's a 0 missing there. So this is really worrying. And this demonstrates, the difficulties that Lebanon is going through. But in order not to depress you too much, I'm going to quickly move on. There was a question about what are we optimistic about? And there is something to be optimistic about. And it's this number, $500 billion. Usually I do a poll and I ask people what they think this number is. $500 billion is the size of the impact investment market, the global impact investment market. This means that there are $500 billion of funding that are willing to go to social enterprises and to initiatives that are changing people's lives and helping people come out of poverty. So the question is, how much of this funding is coming to Lebanon? And sadly, I have to say that very, very little, not even 1% of this funding is coming to Lebanon right now. But this is not a reason to be sad. On the contrary, this means that there is a huge opportunity. And if we do things right, we could get some of this funding channeled to Lebanon. And this is probably what can help save us and help us get out of this crisis. Because today, we need foreign investors to be supporting Lebanon again and to be looking at Lebanon again. And we can do it through impact investing. So what do we need to be attracting this funding to Lebanon? We need a very strong social enterprise sector. And this is why I want to talk to you today about social enterprises and about Alfanar's mission in Lebanon and how we can all support social enterprises so that we have strong investment-ready organizations that can help us attract this funding to the country. But first, I want to just take a step back because I'm not sure how many of you know what is a social enterprise and understand the distinction between a social enterprise and an NGO. So the usual definition that is used is that a social enterprise is an organization that has a business model just like any private sector organization, but it's applied to solving a social, cultural, or environmental need. The difference with an NGO is that sometimes you have NGOs that are selling cookies once in a while or selling towels or organizing some events to raise income. This is not a business model. This is fundraising. Even if you are selling a product, a charity that doesn't have a business model geared towards selling products and services is just a charity. And it's not CSR either, because CSR is done once in a while and is not something, the impact is not sustainable. So there are a few prerequisites to considering a social enterprise, to identifying a social enterprise. The first one is that the social impact should be part of its mission and its articles of association. So as I was saying before, it's not CSR, it's not once in a while, it is their mission. They also aim to be profitable and they reinvest the majority of their profits into growing their impact and their organization. But also they monitor and report on their social impact because their aim is to scale this impact. And now, depending on the funders, there are some other prerequisites that they look at. It can be one of the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. It could be gender equality and other things. I just want to give you two examples of social enterprises. The first one on the left is an organization that Alfanar started working with just after the August 4th blast. It's a social enterprise called Betco that was launched by March NGO. What they do is they provide on-the-job vocational training to youth from marginalized communities in construction. So basically, by working with them to rebuild some of the businesses that we are supporting on the ground today, we are actually creating careers to these young people. And we are helping them have a livelihood, and we are helping Betco become a serious construction company that can sustain its impact over the long term and be employed by private sector organizations. Another example is BOT. And BOT, interestingly, is doing a project for Columbia Business School. You have outsourced one of the departments of Columbia Business School has outsourced a project to BOT. What they do is they train young people in digital skills, and then they help them run projects for clients anywhere around the world and in Lebanon. So those are two examples of social enterprises. Now, the question is, why is it important to support social enterprises? I don't know if you know, but in Lebanon, there's 13,000 registered NGOs. Apparently, it's the highest proportion per capita in the world. This is unsustainable because all these organizations are fighting to get the same funding. And as Johnny said before, whenever there's an appeal that is made, we only get a very small percentage. So this means that NGOs that have incredible programs may not be able to sustain their program. Right now, a lot of NGOs have gotten a lot of funding because there's a lot of attention given to Lebanon and there's a lot of money flowing to Lebanon. But next year or the year after, the funding may run out. So if they don't have a sustainable stream of income coming from products and services, they will have to lay off their staff and to close projects, which would be really unfortunate. There is also a huge need to focus on job creation for underprivileged communities. As you may know, whenever investors put money into companies, it's usually high-tech companies, but high-tech companies very rarely employ people from vulnerable communities, whereas social enterprises operate in the traditional sectors, and that makes a huge difference. Also, it has been proven across almost all indicators that social enterprises outperform SMEs. So they do better than SMEs. As Kim was saying before, studies have shown that if a consumer can buy the same product from a regular organization or a social enterprise, 90% consumers will buy from a social enterprise. So it will help in boosting the economy and they will be growing really fast. Last point is what I was saying before about the $500 billion. Impact investors want to come to Lebanon. They want to come to the Middle East. They want to support. So we have to support social enterprises, strengthen them, help them grow, become investment ready so that we can attract this funding to Lebanon. One more thing I wanted to explain. Some of you may be wondering, what is a venture philanthropy organization? So very quickly, because I think I'm running out of time, or I have already run out of time. A venture philanthropy organization is an organization whose mission is to support social enterprises. We do that not only with funding, but also with management support, training, and access to networks. The management support that we provide is very engaged. So we have one social investment officer supporting 4 social enterprises. So we spend a lot of time with them. And basically, we help them in with three aspects. One is to scale their impact. 2 is to strengthen their operations and organizations. And 3 is to help them become more financially sustainable and investment ready. We also have a unique offering in the market, which is an impact management offering, whereby we help them with impact measurement, impact monitoring. We give them tools that they can use to measure their impact in real time. And the last thing I wanted to say is that for any of you who are wondering what to do with your lives or with your careers, I highly encourage you to work in the social investment sector and to support social enterprises, because you can truly help us in changing the world. I think everybody knows this saying from Steve Jobs, but I believe it's very true. And I really hope that many of the ones who are listening in will help us in supporting social enterprises in Lebanon. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Michelle, for this amazing saying and for explaining more about venture philanthropy and sharing how Alfanar is growing its social impact in a sustainable fashion through a strong income stream. Now, moving forward, I'm happy to introduce Zeina Mhanna from LIFE. Zeina has joined LIFE in 2014 to lead all Promote activities. Her appointment was a key step to grow and institutionalize the Promote pillar, which aims to support job creation, advance economic policy in Lebanon, and mobilize the Lebanese diaspora towards developmental and relief projects in Lebanon. Prior to joining LIFE, Zeina has worked with major investment banks in a variety of capital market sales roles in London. She started her career in Morgan Stanley before moving to JP Morgan and later to Santander GBM. Zeina has completed the program for leadership development at the Harvard Business School in 2018. She also holds a master's degree in finance from ESP in Paris and a BA in economics from the American University of Beirut. Now I'm going to pass it over to you, Zeina.
Thanks, Zahi. It's always the most difficult when you're the last panelist because everything has been said. But maybe I'll start off by giving a quick overview of what life is, because I can see from the participants that there's quite a lot of Lebanese. And then I'll go through the relief effort that we're doing, as well as the support to social entrepreneurship. So Life is a membership organization that was launched in 2009. Originally, it was, sorry, I forgot, actually, I have to open the presentation. Originally, it was supposed to be a network only for finance professionals globally, but we opened up to consultants, law, and technology recently. So basically, in 2 words, it's a network of Lebanese in the diaspora that want to support Lebanon one way or the other. So I'm going to run very briefly through the different programs that we have at Live, and just need to figure out a way to open the presentation. 1 second. Maybe if Katie, do you have it? I can't find it.
I can share it for you, Zeina.
Yeah, for some, I think I found it. Sorry, I found it. Okay, obviously technology is not my strongest point. Okay, so so that's Life in 2 words. We are a not-for-profit. We are registered in the UK, the US, France, Switzerland, Australia, and Lebanon. And before I talk about what we've done for the Beirut Emergency Fund, really the DNA of Life has always been education, because we believe education is actually sustainable development, sustainable relief when you invest in the education of someone. So we give around 100 scholarships a year, and the main added value of the scholarship of Life is the mentorship program that comes with it. So every scholar is assigned a mentor who literally handholds them until they find a job. So they help them with their career orientation, they help them prepare for an interview, how to write their CV, how to find an internship, how to find a job. And I'm actually really proud to say that 95% of our scholars end up finding a job within less than a year of their graduation, within 6 months, even those in Lebanon. So the power of networks and mentorship. And another reason why we believe also a lot in education, especially going forward, because it's always been the business model of Lebanon. We produce good talent, they emigrate, they become successful diaspora, they either send remittances back to their families, or they invest in Lebanon by either buying real estate or helping their cousin who wants to start a startup in Lebanon. So this has always been the success model of Lebanon, which is the success of the diaspora, which comes from the good education system. So once you break that, you're really breaking the whole business model of Lebanon. So we've given 100 scholarships this year, all assigned with mentors, and soon we're going to actually start fundraising for education for the next cycle of students. So now, I know I'm supposed to be speaking about social entrepreneurship, but I'm just going to say a couple of words of what we've done since the Beirut blast. So a couple of days after the blast, we got together with our partner, SEAL, and Lebnet to basically create a coalition of diaspora organizations to raise funds for Beirut. So far, we have raised $8 million, and more funds are coming in. And I'm very happy to say that most speakers today in this webinar have been funded by the Beirut Emergency Fund. So basically, a quick overview of what we've done. So I will start actually with the eligibility criteria. So, I mean, as Michelle said, there's like 13,000 NGOs in Lebanon, and everyone's doing rehabilitation at the moment. So we really spend a lot of time.
Zeina, if you could just click on presentation mode.
Sorry. Okay. I mean, I use Zoom every day and I'm just like still not good at it. Okay, so we go, the due diligence process actually is, we spend a lot of time selecting the NGOs we want to work with, not only, passing the due diligence, obviously, which is step one, but also we go through their proposals. We go through every single details of the proposal, even like which exchange rate they're using for every item in their proposal, to really make sure that every penny donated by our donors is spent wisely. And after we disperse the funds, we spend also quite a bit of energy and time monitoring where the money is going. And for that, actually, we've partnered with 3QA, who helps us with the monitoring and reporting. So anyway, the sectors that we're covering are rehabilitation of households and SMEs, medical needs, rehabilitation of hospitals, mental health, and support to SMEs. So the support to SMEs, NGOs usually don't really support SMEs, but given that more than 60% of the population today lives under the poverty line, I mean, the only way to break that cycle of continuous reliance on aid and food boxes and medical is to really create jobs in Lebanon. So our vision of support to SMEs is basically, obviously the rehabilitation is one element of that. There's the CapEx, so if they have damaged machinery or stock, we will replenish it. And the third part, which could be really probably the most impactful part, is the business support. So our partner on this initiative, Together Beirut, they've mobilized a whole list of volunteers who will be spending quite a lot of time with these businesses to help them, how to write a balance sheet, legal support, how to negotiate, their rent with the landlord. Actually, they will negotiate on their behalf reduction of rent with the landlord. They're going to help them maybe in their marketing, branding, changing the display in the shop. So, and that's a bit how life does things. The grants that we give, whether it's to NGOs or to SMEs or even to students, always comes with a different type of support, which is the kind of the business or the mentorship that comes with it to maximize really the impact of every penny donated. And thankfully, because we are a membership organization, every dollar that has been donated to the Beirut Emergency Fund has been sent directly to the beneficiary NGOs. And I guess we're lucky to be able to do that because our costs are covered by our membership. So the sister organization, which is the membership organization. So yeah, I mean, all this extra, vetting, monitoring, business support is really provided pro bono to the beneficiaries. That's why it's important to become a life member. And okay, so the next is the support of social enterprises. Okay, I'm not gonna go through the definition, which Michelle presented very eloquently. So we've been supporting social entrepreneurs since 2018. The three actually that are currently in our portfolio are Coady, SE Factory, and BOT. 2 out of the 3 are actually part of the Alfanar portfolio. So we work with Alfanar on that. And I mean, the reason why we actually supported specifically these 3 is I would say the number 2, which is how to hire Lebanese talent remotely. Because again, I think the human capital in Lebanon is the biggest asset that we have. And brain drain is not always the answer. Although, a lot of people want to leave, but if we can manage to create an outsourcing hub in Lebanon, especially now with the COVID era and with the massive devaluation of the Lebanese currency, which lost like 80% of its value since the beginning of the year, I think Lebanon has become probably the cheapest hub of a pool of skilled talent, potentially with the devaluation. So anyway, so with our portfolio of social enterprises, Coady, SE Factory, and BOT, we provide them with grants, but also we introduce them to our network so they can, find jobs basically for the people that they train. So now, I think the conclusion is, how can you guys support social entrepreneurs in Lebanon? I mean, the power of networks. I'm a big believer that sometimes a single introduction to a student or to an entrepreneur can be life-changing, and it doesn't cost anything to do it. That's what we call the social capital. So I think the power of networks, I mean, networks are almost everything. So by accessing a network of mentors, because a lot of these social enterprises need support, you know, how to write a business plan, you know, fundraising strategy, you know, all sorts of, you know, business support, accessing to new markets. So a lot of companies in Lebanon, whether they are in F&B or in the creative sector, they're ready to scale, but they don't know how to. So they don't know, you know, where to start. They don't have a foreign passport. They don't have money outside of Lebanon. And the access to new markets is really the key to go back to the title of this webinar today, is to revive businesses, to revive Beirut and to revive businesses in Lebanon is really access to new markets, because the market is very small here, and unless they scale and export, they will never be able to survive. And we have decades of amazing brands in, you know, jewelry, craftsmanship, soap, olive oil, you know, you name it, honey, that really are ready to be exported. So I think that is really key today. And the access to capital, obviously, especially for those who want to establish themselves in foreign markets. And the last one is probably to buy more Lebanese products. Now I make sure that every product I buy almost is made in Lebanon.
Thanks a lot, Zeina, for sharing more about how life is supporting NGOs and SMEs, mainly in the rehabilitation and medical sectors. Now we're going to move into Q&A. I'm going to try to read as many questions as possible for you, Michelle and Zeina, to answer. So starting with the first question, on a country that consistently is building itself, and given the importance of sustainability, how do you gain donor/investors' trust, and how do you protect your projects and convince them that this can be sustainable? Can start with Michelle, then go over to Zeina.
Sorry, your voice was very low.
Okay, sorry.
Can you start again?
Sure. So I was saying that I'm going to start with the first question, which is on a country that is consistently building itself, and given the importance of sustainability, how do you gain donors/investors' trust, and how do you protect your projects and convince them that this can be sustainable?
Okay. Well, I think that when a project is more than just a one-time project, it's usually pretty obvious because there is a revenue-generating activity. So it's not just donor-funded. So, for example, today, Alfanar is supporting and Life is supporting BOT. We are giving them grants to help them grow their business. But if we stop giving them grants, they have Columbia University giving them income for a project. So they can just rely on clients like Columbia University and sustain their project. They don't need Life and Alfanar grants. So this is how basically you can become sustainable, is just ensuring that you have not just donors, but you also have clients and you have a product and a service that you can sell on the market. I don't know if that answers the question.
Yes, it does. Zeina, I'm going to pass it over to you.
I mean, in terms of the trust of donors, this is very important to us. And actually, that's why we go the extra mile in making sure the money is spent properly, because we know that we have the trust of our donors. So that's why we actually hired 3QA to help us do very close monitoring and reporting and due diligence on the ground for the NGOs. So we go through every single detail from their financials to their track record to, you know, their board members. Like we probably end up knowing more about them than they know about themselves. So we really do all that extra work, and the reporting is very important. I'm on the ground, so I go and I visit, you know, what's happening on the ground as well. But also, what I wanted to say, I forgot what I wanted to say, but I think, yeah, I mean, that's the main thing, is the due diligence, reporting and monitoring to make sure that the second point I wanted to say, sorry, is the collaboration. So for example, Impact Lebanon, we have weekly calls with them to make sure that we're not funding the same projects. So we don't, for example, let's say we're funding the same NGO, NGO can submit by error the same proposal for both. We actually speak to other NGOs to make sure that we're not funding the same project twice, to remove all these inefficiencies in the system. So we collaborate, we monitor, we report, you know, we go through the details.
Okay, moving on to the next question. How are NGO beneficiaries accessing funds with the current capital control? Is it all fresh money accounts, or are there delays because of this?
Yes, it's mostly
yeah.
fresh money. I mean, sometimes there are local donors who are giving dollars in Lebanon, and I mean, it's not that they can't access it, they can access it in Lebanese pounds with a limit, but a lot of banks are no longer putting limits on NGOs, so they're letting them access as many Lebanese pounds as they need.
Okay. Now a question to you, Zeina. Will your emergency funds eventually merge with your regular programming? Will live programs need to evolve?
Yeah, so I think I mean, I hope Lebanon will not need more emergency funds, honestly, but yes, I think it's gonna naturally evolve into a more sustainable support. Maybe it will continue to be relief, but it will be maybe a more sustainable type of relief, such as the support to SMEs. So far we've only supported in the past social entrepreneurs that are in the digital sector, but I think we're gonna start looking at, you know, widening the scope of the type of enterprises we support. So yeah, I think the relief will move from kind of emergency relief to more sustainable relief, where we will always be giving grants, but that will come with a whole holistic approach to really make these beneficiaries not come back for more funding, you know, 1 year later.
Okay, that makes sense. Now a question to you, Michelle and Alfanar. Do you also consider impact measurement when deciding on grants, or do you don't?
Yes, definitely. I mean, as Alfanar, when we give a grant, we only give a grant on condition that there is a measurable social impact and that this impact can also be scalable. And this is, we support organizations for a period of 3 to 4 years. And our objective during these 3 to 4 years is for them to scale their impact. So we need to measure it to be able to see where they went from baseline to end line. And we give them impact management tools that help them do this. So we have a business intelligence tool that's called Click that we customize to their business that helps them have a dashboard that on real time they can access anytime and see how they're progressing in terms of their impact measurements. So it's really important, and they have very specific KPIs. We have a whole series of training. We have 4 to 5 training that are all focused around impact management.
On to the next question. Are there currently NGOs supporting students who are trying to leave Lebanon and are unable to support themselves outside of the country due to the devaluation of the currency?
We supported our scholars when they needed money and they couldn't access. So we did that last year, well, since October. We didn't do it widely, you know, to all students who cannot access their funds. We do that for our scholars, yes. Separately, we actually participated in this fundraiser that happened in a few countries, France, England, where basically with the embassy, you know, we fundraised to support students that were actually trapped in the UK because of COVID. Their parents couldn't send them money because of the capital controls, and the schools were closed or the universities were closed. So yeah, Life participated in fundraising for these very specific cases. But generally speaking, I mean, we're not doing that. When we give a scholarship, yeah, we go the extra mile, but we don't do it on a nation level. I don't know if there's other NGOs who are doing it. I don't know if Michelle is aware of any.
No, I don't.
Yeah, it is a very tough moment indeed for students who want to pursue education and like how to gather funding. So it's like a critical moment for that.
Yeah.
So now a question to Kim. Given your experience at Arc-en-Ciel, what is your personal biggest lesson learned, if you were to choose one, about working at a social enterprise in Lebanon?
Well, if I was to
What
choose,
a tough question.
Yeah.
Tough one.
Yes. It's actually, I will mention the main challenge. It's that here in Lebanon, when we say the word social enterprise, people hear the word social. Because of the fact that we have so many NGOs, like Michelle said, we have more NGOs per capita than any country in the world. People think, okay, social. They don't hear the word enterprise, which means company, which means business. So it's very hard to have people make the distinction that a social enterprise is actually a company and not a charity.
Yeah, yeah, I believe the meaning of social enterprise differs in like different parts of the world. For some, it's like an organization that makes money, and for others, it's just like doing good in general. So I've heard that a couple of times. Okay, so thanks a lot, Michelle, Zeina, and Kim for answering these questions. Now I'm going to pass it over to you, Katie.
Thank you, Zahi, and thank you everyone for sharing such different parts of this story that's happening now. And to wrap this up, I'd just like to open the floor for everyone to say a few final thoughts, whether that is just maybe something that's come up for you in sharing what you're working on, or maybe a way that you think current students and alumni can be a part of continuing the good work you're doing. And so I think we'll go into a gallery view. Matan, if you're there in the background.
I can start.
Yes, wonderful. Thank you, Mhanna.
Yes. I mean, I think despite all the miseries our country is going through and has, I mean, historically has been going through, one great asset that we have are the Lebanese people that even after leaving Lebanon, stay connected and help in every way and form they can. So thank you, Lara. Thank you, Zahi. You are great ambassadors for Lebanon and now for Nusaned. Keep it up.
Thank you, Mhanna.
I would like to build on that and concur with Mhanna. The Lebanese diaspora has been truly incredible and has always been incredible. So for those of you who wonder how you can help, anything you do helps. Even if you buy a product, you are making a difference. Just make sure when you buy a product, as much as possible, if you can buy from a social enterprise, if you can buy from a product that is supporting vulnerable communities, then the impact is even bigger. And for those of you who want to sincerely work in the social impact sector, I invite you to come back to Lebanon, because I came back after 20 years abroad, 27 years actually. I spent 27 years abroad. I worked for 20 years abroad, and I have zero regrets. And this has been the most inspiring and meaningful thing I have done in my life. And despite all the struggles and everything we've been through the last year, and my family as well has really suffered from August 4th, despite all that, I'm staying because this is truly the most meaningful part of my career. So if you are asking yourself whether to come back, I invite you to join us. You will not regret it.
I guess I'll go next. I also came back after spending like maybe 12 years outside of Lebanon. Never regretted it. And although sometimes I feel like I have to leave again, but I'm definitely, I'm happy to be here in times like this. I would say one thing, if you're feeling, sad about what's happening in Lebanon or depressed, I think the only way, like at least for me, the only thing that made me pick up the pieces and move forward and stay positive is to help. Honestly, once you do something you feel useful, you just shift that energy of sadness and depression into an energy of fulfillment. So instead of being, depressed or sad about what's happening, let's twist it into something positive and constructive and meaningful.
And just a word for those who are not Lebanese on the chat. Make sure, my suggestion to you is really try to make sure you do something with an impact wherever you are in the world. It's the best thing for you because it's the best for the others.
Exactly, echoing Kim, actually. To the international community on this webinar, you probably have Lebanese friends, and you know how, we're tiny, but we're resilient and we're resourceful, and we will rebuild and we will rise again. I have no doubt. You probably know how we have probably the highest per capita presentation at CBS and other top business schools, just for the sake of example. But this massive tragedy can only, we can only come out of that with the strong support of the global community. So I, kindly invite you to keep talking about Beirut, keep the awareness going, buy Lebanese products, hire top Lebanese talent, donate if you can. Anything would help in these dire circumstances. And thank you very much.
Thank you, Johnny. Just wanted to say a note from myself. Being in New York and a bit far from Beirut, I feel a bit powerless to contribute on the ground to rebuild Beirut. But I'm so happy to see all of these amazing NGOs and social enterprises that are doing amazing work. And I'm grateful for all of the work that everyone is doing on the ground. So thanks a lot for everyone.
Thank you all. I echo also what was mentioned earlier. This has been a pleasure. It's a very informative session to understand what's going on the ground, but also off the ground from the people that are outside of our country.
Well, thank you all, and beautifully said. I think, Zeina, you made a really nice point, which is, this is an opportunity to build new and maybe even better. So hopefully everyone has been inspired by all of you coming out here today, albeit virtually. And if you do feel inspired to donate, we have posted the organizations in the chat. And if you are out there in the audience and you want to be involved in social enterprise in some way, and maybe you're interested in somehow connecting with an organization in Lebanon, learn more about the Tamer Center, because we offer summer internships that are funded if you work for a social enterprise. It is competitive, so you do need to apply and find a good organization to work with. But that's what we're here to do as well, and support organizations just like these. And finally, just want to put a plug in for the Social Enterprise Conference that is going on tomorrow. And we're doing it every other week throughout the fall and spring semesters up through the end of March. And that's another way to continue to learn more about social enterprise and where you might fit into that world. So that's kind of my little advertising piece. And so I will wrap this up. And then if anyone has anything else they want to say, I think, you know, we've given ourselves a little bit of extra time just to say really anything you want. But my thanks to, first and foremost, Johnny. You're the reason that all of this even happened. So thanks for reaching out to the Tamer Center. Seriously, Lara and Zahi, thank you for collaborating. You are both incredibly passionate, well-spoken people, and we're lucky to have you here representing the MENA Club. And Kim, Michelle, Zeina, and Mona, thank you for the good work that you all are doing and will continue to do. And we are lucky that you decided to have time or to make time for us here today. Lastly, thank you to Matan Skolnick, Diana Rambo, Gwen Shufro, and Hannah Slow of the Tamer Center, who actually are making all of this happen in the background. I am merely a figurehead. So they are the true miracle workers at the Tamer Center. So thanks to them. And with that, I want to leave the floor to any of you if you just want to say one more thing, and then we'll be done.
Katie, from my side, huge thanks to you and all the Tamer Center team and the leadership. Really, from A to Z, this has been very, very helpful for us, inspiring, and it's great to see that Colombia and the Tamer Center are, you know, looking out for their alumni, Lebanese alumni and students. This is inspiring, honestly, and please keep us in mind.
For sure.
I would say that we have an academic partnership with Columbia Business School. We actually currently have 3 scholars. So please encourage more people to apply for the Life Scholarship from Columbia. We really like their profile. I think we received a very small number of applications, and the success rate was actually quite high relative to other universities. So just make sure you spread the word. But they have to be Lebanese to apply for the scholarship. We discriminate on that.
Good to know. All right. Well, thanks everyone. Please take care of yourselves. And Mona, did you want to say something?
No, I just wanted to say thank you again for giving us the opportunity to present Nusaned.
Yes, thank you, Katie. Thank you everyone for the organization.
Thank you.
All right.
Bye.
Bye, everyone. Be safe.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.